We begin this new adventure in a small town, lost in the middle of nowhere, which is being attacked by Fenrir, a giant Class S wolf. Faced with the situation, the villagers decide to hire a group of warriors to take care of the monster, who, luckily for everyone, managed to defeat it without any problems. There in the background we can see our protagonist, a short 15-year-old boy with blue hair who, despite being very weak, was part of the group of warriors, although he only acted as a mule and was in charge of carrying things for them. Later, during the post-fight dinner, the leader fires him because a pack mule is no longer useful and they need to find a strong companion to improve the group's level. In that manner, the adventure of Kurt gets underway as he starts his travels in an effort to earn a living. During the trip, he arrives at a city where he finds an employment agency, so he decides to try his luck. Inside, he is greeted by a girl who makes him take some tests to see what level of skills he has for combat. But as expected, our protagonist is useless, so he won't be able to work as a warrior. This discourages our Kuro, but the girl recommends that he stay in the city a little longer, and he takes the alchemy and blacksmithing tests in a week. This excites the protagonist for a second, until he remembers that he doesn't have a single coin left broken in half. So the girl makes him lift a bag of sand that he barely manages to do. So she offers the protagonist a job as a laborer on the castle walls. With letter in hand, the protagonist accepts and arrives at the job site. His new boss gives him the job of making cement blocks to repair a wall and leaves. When he returns, the boss finds that practically the entire wall has been built in just 3 hours. This surprises the guy, so he asks him how long he plans to work as a bricklayer. The prod replies that he will do it for a week. The boss is excited about this, so he pays him for that day's work and sends him to rest for the day. The next day, the protagonist finishes a giant section in less than a day's work. But that, apart from making his boss congratulate him, causes him to get fired because he leaves the rest of the workers unable to earn any money. Once again, with our protagonist completely discouraged at the employment office, the girl looks for a new job for him but can't find anything. But just then, a woman enters the reception area. She was looking for someone to dig for minerals, but since she didn't have money to pay in advance, he couldn't hire anyone. Card overhears this and immediately offers himself the job. Having no other options, the woman hires him, and they head straight to the mountain town. After the two of them set off to the mountain, the office waifu is left fantasizing about our protagonist and Palm, and stumbles upon the sandbags. There we learn that these weren't normal bags. These are used to measure the level of magic and become heavier for a person the more magical power they have. So at that point, it becomes clear that Card might actually be a really impressive magic chap. On the other hand, our protagonist and his new boss arrive at their camp at the foot of the mountain, but since they were already late, they decided to take the rest of the day off. The next morning, Carl had to start his work. The white-haired girl wanted to dig anywhere to see if any minerals would magically appear, but our protagonist, who already has experience, tells her no and shows her where there might be crystals. Once in the right place, Carl grabs a stone and boom, crystal on the first try. The guy keeps going and in less than a rooster crows, our protagonist manages to gather a bunch of crystals and then fill them with magic. Thus turning them into magic crystals so that he can sell them at a higher price. After charging all the crystals with magic, Yulisha gets ready to go sell them, goes back to the city, and leaves the protagonist to continue with his work. Upon arriving, she goes to a friend's store to sell them. At first, she offers him 10 gold coins for the whole bag. Until she looks at the stone properly, she does a quick examination and realizes that it is a high-quality magic stone. So the price changes to 500 gold coins for the whole bag. After the payment, the buyer asks a white-haired girl who made such high-quality stones. Yulisha refuses to disclose the information without the protagonist's permission. The buyer understands this but recommends that she take the maker of those stones with her. Turns out, given his magic level, they'd make him director of the Royal Magic Institute immediately without any hesitation. They would even make him a count. Yisha is surprised and promises to do so. Upon leaving the store, the waifu goes straight to the employment office to ask what is known about the protagonist and his magic. There she learns that the truth is not much. Apart from what he has already told her, they only tell her about all the work he did as Shalom, and she is left speechless. So the white-haired girl asks the girl in the office not to tell anyone about Carl for the time being. The next morning, Yulisha arrives back at the mountain and the protagonist has already settled in completely. In a single night, he built an entire cabin as if it were nothing, leaving Yulisha speechless once again. Once inside the cabin, the white-haired girl tells our protagonist what happened with her stones and that she was even offered the position of director at the Royal Institute of Magic Annuad. However, Cart, with all his humility and without being aware of what he is capable of, rejects any proposal and prefers to continue working with her. Julia understands and decides to go out to work again, so the protagonist takes her to a place in the mountain where he tells her that no more than 50 meters underground, she should find minerals. While she finishes there, he goes to look for minerals in a more complicated area. Ulisha spends the whole day finishing until she finds a single topaz mineral. With the sunset already hitting her neck, she decides to go see how Cart is doing, expecting to find an impressive excavation. And indeed, upon arriving, she comes across a very professional mine that our protagonist built in a single afternoon. Impressed, Yasyali goes in to look for it and realizes how terribly deep it is. And in there, Cart greets her with a smile, but gives her bad news, so to speak. According to him, he found almost no valuable minerals in the cave. The guy only found industrial quantities of mithril, a material that in his hometown was so abundant that they considered it trash. Upon hearing this, Ulisha turns pale. It turns out that mithril is one of the most difficult materials to find. After the initial surprise, the white-haired girl returns to Earth and asks him what mineral was he looking for if he considers mithril trash. Z tells her that he was looking for orichalcum, a mineral that for him appears everywhere, but that in reality is very valuable and that he barely managed to find a little. Ulisha is even more surprised than before, since that mineral is known as the metal of the gods. She asks him how it is so easy for him to get such a mineral, and he calmly replies that he only has to dig 7 kilometers down. The girl is no longer surprised that Carp is capable of something like that in such a short time, so she decides to ask him what happened to the hole he should have left. He responds with the same calmness that he already covered it because it was dangerous. However, after so many questions, Ulisha ends up discovering something truly shocking. Carp not only dug a huge mine in a single afternoon, but he also made a tunnel that crosses the mountain from side to side. After 2 days, the duo finishes extracting all the minerals from the mountain. With the job done, Carl returns to the city, while Ulisha keeps the tunnel that the protagonist made, taking advantage of her shark mentality and taking advantage of it as a trip to charge the merchants who pass by. Upon arriving at the city, our protagonist runs into Bandana, one of his old companions from the group of warriors. He asks her what she's doing there, and she confesses that she was also fired from the group, although we know that this is a lie. In reality, the boss sent her to look for him because there is no better cook than Cart, but we also discover that she plays the double agent. Bandana decided to disobey the boss because his real mission is to keep an eye on the protagonist since he is actually a student of the Great Sage. Taking advantage of the situation, Bandana sends him to help a craftsman in the Atelier's workshops, where medicines, swords, and magical artifacts are made and sold. The protagonist, true to his hard-working style, quickly arrives at the workshop, where one of the teacher's assistants welcomes him and lets him in. However, the work he had to do was only cleaning and not manufacturing, as he expected. Carl finishes in the blink of an eye and goes out to find the assistant to warn him. But while he is walking to the house, he accidentally enters the room of a mysterious girl and finds her naked dead. There he manages to see that she has a curse mark on her stomach, which worries him considerably. However, upon examining her, he realizes that the curse is not as advanced as he feared, so he decides to prepare something for her to eat to help her. Meanwhile, on the other side of the city, Ulisha meets up with her friend from the store and tells her all about the protagonist. Upon learning of the boy's tremendous talent, they both agree that it would be best to slow him down a bit to prevent him from exposing his abilities and putting himself in danger due to his great power. That is why Ulisha plans to offer to be his personal escort to keep him close and protect him from any threat. On the other hand, our protagonist was already finishing dinner for the cursed girl when just then the teacher of the atelier appears. Carl apologizes for having used the kitchen without permission and clarifies that he only did it to give the girl something to eat, which causes the woman to be surprised. She asks him not to tell anyone about the curse. He nods and receives his payment, concluding his day. After the protagonist leaves, the teacher brings the plate to the cursed girl. Upon tasting a single spoonful, the woman immediately collapsed to the ground, leading her to think the worst, that the food was poisoned. But to her relief, it wasn't. The girl gets up as if nothing had happened and tells Ulisha that she feels completely refreshed and is now cured. This leaves the woman speechless. Without wasting any time, she goes straight to the shop of Mimiko, Ulisha's friend, and tells her everything that happened with the cursed girl. That's when the truth is revealed. The young woman is actually Lady Liselot, the third princess of the nation, who was cursed by mysterious people in order to cause her death and unleash a new war between nations. The revelation leaves the friends speechless, but the gossip of the night was yet to come. At that precise moment, the master of the atelier reveals that the one who miraculously cured the princess was none other than Cart. Julisha, upon learning that it was our protagonist, throws her hands up in the air. And the guy couldn't go halfway without attracting attention while she was away. Meanwhile, Mimiko is getting more interested in the possible suspects in the attempted assassination of the princess, leaving a list with only 3 names on her list. The ones pointed out are Saint Nova Barastax, First General of the Royal Expeditionary Forces, Tristan Mayoff, Bishop of the Church of Poland, and Isadora Arkamana, the current queen, and stepmother of the princess. Since they can't accuse anyone lightly, and especially without evidence, the master of the atelier comes up with a plan. Since the princess is about to turn 15, the age at which she should be leaving for a year to train her skills, they decide to set up a fake workshop to bring the murderer in and catch him in the act, However, while all this is being plotted, our boy heads to the workshop with all the attitude, only to find it closed. This unfortunately means that he is left without a job again, which ends up disappointing him a little, but just then his stomach growls. So he decides to put his sorrows aside and enter a tavern to eat something. Once there, they hear the conversation of what seems to be some adventurers who need a mover to carry their things, so Carl immediately approaches them and offers his services. The group initially doubts that he is capable of lifting much weight, so he decides to demonstrate his strength by lifting the 2 heaviest members of the group. This completely convinces them, and they go on an adventure together, reaching a cave where there are some mysterious ruins. However, a goblin manages to see them, and before they can eliminate it, the creature warns the rest of his species. Realizing that the enemies are too many, the group becomes very nervous, not knowing what to do. Just then, Carl discovers a secret door, quickly opens it, and offers to escape through there. The youngest of the group gets in with the protagonist and closes the door, while the rest decide to face the monsters to buy them time, while they look for a safe exit al semine. However, given the way things are going in this story, you'll find inside that room 3 dragons, iron golems no less. While our protagonist gets out of one predicament and gets into another, we see Yulisha Mecha, who together with the princess goes out to look for Cop. Upon arriving at his room and finding it empty, they both begin to wonder if something bad has happened to him. Just then, Bandana intercepts them from outside to tell them that the protagonist went on an expedition with some adventurers to the cave. Yisha immediately goes out to see who was talking to them, but true to her ninja style, Bandana had already disappeared without a trace. With no other option, the girls decide to trust the mysterious voice and head to the cave, where they find the adventurers fighting the goblins. Yisha decided to help them while the princess casts a spell that maximizes her physical abilities to leave the white-haired girl ready for battle. For their part, our protagonist and the brunette girl are still trapped with the dragons, which leads her to regret having accepted the mission. But Carl assures her that she has nothing to fear. He charges at the beast and slices it with his dagger as if it were butter, The brunette is completely stunned to see that the same guy who supposedly couldn't even handle a simple slime now dispatches dragons without the slightest effort. After taking care of the beast, Yulisha enters, and upon hearing the brunette's story, she also drops her jaw, The protagonist greets her upon seeing her and asks her worriedly about the rest of the adventurers. She replies that they are fine and only have minor injuries, which relieves Card considerably. With the situation calmer, Yulisha tells him that they are going to open a new workshop and offers to work there with her. At first, our boy rejects her because he had already committed to the group of adventurers, but Yulisha, who is not slow at all, extends the offer to them too. So everyone is happy and hired and accepts the white-haired girl's proposal without thinking twice. Julia also takes the opportunity to suggest that the protagonist take the skills test again, so upon returning to the city, Carl undergoes the exam, this time evaluated by Mimiko. After a while, the merchant finally has the results, and our boy turns out to be completely broken. It comes as no surprise that his skills are ridiculously high. This is the reason they were unable to measure them precisely. The standard test goes from Class G to Class SS, but the system is unable to measure the last step, Class SSS, in which each and every one of Card skills are located, leaving both Yulisha and the employee who had previously evaluated him and who happened to be passing by more than surprised, the highest. The next day, with our protagonist reevaluated, the entire group heads to their new city, where the new Atelier Master workshop will be. Since there is no teleportation stone to that place, they have to travel by carriage. As they chat during the trip, Kay and Danzo seem very happy with their new job as private guards. But Sina, who is not a fool, is suspicious of the ease with which they were offered such a job. The brunette knows that it was probably so that she would not talk about what happened in the cave, so she decides to be alert at all times in case something strange happens. After a while, the group finally arrives at their new home. There, Yulisha takes them to where the workshop will be. Everyone is surprised to see that it is still an empty lot. Then, the white-haired girl reveals that Kate must be in charge of building the entire building. In the meantime, they will live in the inn. Back in the room, Yulisha seats everyone and, suspecting that Kina wouldn't believe her story, decides to tell them the truth. She introduces herself as a former adventurer from the royal family, and the princess reveals her identity, telling them what happened with the curse and how she saved her. She also tells them about the protagonist's tremendous abilities. The three are surprised, but they don't understand why they should hide their abilities from the protagonist, to which Yulisha explains that if word gets out, he would become a target like the princess. Danzo understands the situation and agrees to continue with the lie, but clarifies that he's not doing it for the crown, but as a friend of court. Kans agrees to, but Saina is still not entirely convinced, though. She doesn't want to put Danzo and her brother in danger, so she decides to go for a walk to think about it. But on the way, she comes across where the protagonist is building the workshop. Upon entering, she is left wide-eyed when she sees that Kurt has already finished the foundations in just a few hours. Without taking advantage, she will be alone with him and asks him if he doesn't mind that they make him work so much. But he, as innocent and smiling as ever, replies that quite the opposite, old Tete. He is happy to be able to help with his skills and that they treat him well, unlike how they did in his old group. After hearing how happy the protagonist is with his current life, he decides to accept the job and lie to him. Meanwhile, in the city center, the Samura meets with Bandana, who is acting as his informant about a mysterious guy. He is Vivinoge, a man who is in charge of infiltrating groups of adventurers to finish them off from the inside, and is the one who tried to kill them by sending them to the cave before with false information. After receiving the report, Danzo heads to the tavern where he finds the villain drunkenly bragging that his next move is to eliminate the princess. Danzo, upon hearing this, sarcastically congratulates him, so he guessed that he is thanking him. But when he turns around and sees that it's the samurai, he throws her by the leg so that she can get them and starts running. In desperation. The bald guy stumbles in the middle of the alley, and Dan, just reaching him, puts his sword to his neck, threatening to cut him like a steak, if he gets close to his friends again. The samurai walks away, but we see that in the darkness was Bandana, who was the one who made the bald guy fall with a cable, and now feels disappointed in Danzo. She wanted him to kill him so that he wouldn't be an obstacle later on, so for a second she prepares to do it herself. But before she can act, boom, some hooded guys appear and take the bald guy away, leaving the girl stiff with fear while they think he must be from the Mimiko intelligence unit. Just then, a messenger crow arrives, informing her that she must go immediately to the protagonist's old town. Leaving Bandana aside, we film about 3 days and see that our protagonist group they can't believe the incredible mansion the guy built in such a short time, so the protagonist, all proud, lets them in and shows them all the rooms in the place. Everything is going great until they reach what will be the Atelier Master's room. There, Carl asks Yulisha when the boss will finally arrive, to which she nervously replies that he was delayed again and that it will take a while longer, so to avoid further questions, she decides to change the subject of conversation and quickly asks our protagonist where his room will be. But the guy, all humble, tells her that he is only an assistant, so he will sleep in the rest area next to the kitchen. Upon hearing this, everyone yells at the protagonist, "You can't!" and tries to convince him to stay in the Atelier Master's room until he arrives. As expected, Carl rejects the offer, but the group becomes very insistent, and after more than 2 hours, they finally manage to convince him to accept Dicep. Converted. During the night, Yulisha is in charge of placing some talismans against the curses that Mimiko gave her to protect the princess. The next morning, with everything protected, we find the protagonist preparing a delicious breakfast. At that moment, the princess appears, taking advantage of the situation to dress very sexy for a car. To get goosebumps when she sees her like that and yell at her that she shouldn't dress like that. Meanwhile, our protagonist gets very nervous in the middle of the fight between the two waifus. But just then Ka arrives, attracted by the smell of freshly baked bread, so our protagonist takes the opportunity to escape the situation by saying that breakfast is ready and asking everyone to come to the table. However, while everyone was having breakfast peacefully, Yulisha wonders where Carl is and why he is not having breakfast with them. The princess reveals that she went to clean some strange marks that someone made on the walls last night, and that after that she will go to have breakfast, which causes Yulisha to run away faster than lightning to prevent the protagonist from removing them. She knows that those magical marks shouldn't be erasable, but she also knows that the one trying is Card's GigaChat is Card's GigaChat. Upon arriving, as expected, it turns out that the protagonist swept them all away without any problem. And when he sees Yulisha, he asks her with total innocence who could have made those ugly marks, The white-haired girl, in order not to compromise the lie, tells her that it was surely some graffiti artist trying to get the blonde's attention, and as innocent as ever, she believes it and doesn't ask anymore. Meanwhile, the white-haired girl goes into a total crisis inside. Since Mimiko isn't arriving for a few days, they're now left completely unprotected against the enemies. We let a couple of days go by, and we quickly set our friends aside to focus on a character known as Marla Faces, Carl's former companion and priestess of the Church of Poland, Papayom. We find her in front of Tristan Maywolf, the bishop of said congregation. Apparently, she also left the protagonist group and is now seeking redemption by wishing to rejoin the church as a sister. However, the bishop has other plans. He rejects her request, citing all the sins she committed during her time with the adventurers. But at that very moment, he reveals that there is something she could do to make him consider erasing his guilt and accepting her back. The bishop pours her a glass of wine. As Marlifa's drink, he confesses that in order to return to the church, he will have to kill the princess. At that precise moment, a curse mark appears on the woman's belly and she falls, writhing in pain. The bishop, unfazed, explains to her that the insurance she has just activated will kill her in a month if she does not fulfill her mission. In the meantime, we return to our friends. Carl is serving breakfast to the princess and Yulisha. The white-haired one is finally breathing easy after the scare of the protection marks, since Mimiko has finally arrived in town and has set up a surveillance network in every corner. Now any enemy movement will be detected immediately. The princess congratulates the protagonist on the delicious food and asks him to prepare the same rice soup as the first time in case she is cursed again. Car thanks her for the compliments and naturally reveals that she will no longer have to worry about curses. It turns out that he does not know how to build conventional barriers, but he managed something much more ingenious. He turned the entire mansion into a shield that bounces any curse directly back to whoever cast it. And since our boy does not have an ounce of evil, the rebound does not kill the aggressor, but simply makes him shine with an intense light. And she cannot believe such madness and runs off to tell Mimiko and Ophelia. The three of them set out to find whoever has recently tried to curse the princess. In an abandoned house, they find the lifeless body of a sorcerer. The light turned him into a walking beacon that gave them away. So his own companions decided to eliminate him so as not to leave any traces. But before the girls can draw any further conclusions, a raven arrives with urgent information. A huge army of skeletons is trying to attack the city. However, the monsters had the misfortune of trying to enter right on the side where the wall built by our protagonist stands on Aramas. As expected, it is no ordinary wall. It begins to absorb the skeletons without receiving a single scratch, completely astonishing the soldiers stationed on the wall. On the other hand, we return to Marlefis, for whom the curse was not punishment enough. The bishop sent her to some ruins in the forest near the city, where a demon uses her as a vessel to channel his magic and summon the skeletons and creatures that besiege the place. Amidst all this chaos, day breaks again, and Yulisha returns to the mansion to inform her friends of the situation. The group of adventurers is not in the city, and the guards are overwhelmed with so many monsters outside the wall. The white-haired girl tells Car that she will go help, but makes it clear that he must remain inside the mansion to protect the princess at all costs. Carp accepts the mission. Yulisha heads to the warehouse in search of her secret weapon, the magic crystals that the protagonist had previously manufactured. With them in hand, she and her friends present themselves to the guards in the war room and explain the plan. The soldiers will act as bait while Yulisha enters the forest to eliminate the source of the monsters. The general approves the proposal, but on one condition. He himself will accompany the young woman to this place. Without further delay, they set off towards the main entrance. Meanwhile, Carp wanders discouraged through the mansion, frustrated at not being able to be on the battlefield with his friend. To distract himself, he starts working on forging a small sword. When he finishes it, the princess appears and unpraises the quality of the blade. Carl, like a true gentleman, ends up giving it to her. But there is something that worries him. Although he might appear quite innocent, our protagonist is anything but stupid. So he asks the blonde directly if there is someone who wants to harm them and if that is the real reason why they curse her so insistently. Having noticed that he already knew, she then decided to share part of the truth. She confirms that it is true, that precisely for that reason, Yulia went to the forest because they believe that the person responsible for everything is there. This frustrates Carl again, who feels that he is not strong enough, but in a second he regains his courage, leaves his excuses aside, and suggests to the princess that they go to the forest together to help his friend She accepts without hesitation, and they both begin to plan how to get out of a city so surrounded by enemies. As the duo prepares, we return to the white-haired girl, who along with the general finds herself surrounded by monsters beyond belief at Eve. But just so when the situation was getting really tough, our favorite adventurers suddenly made their appearance. It turns out that Kans and his group had just returned from exploring when they found the whole mess and decided to step in to help Yulisha. She seizes the moment and uses one of Carp's magic crystals to clear the entire area in one fell swoop, clearing the way to enter the ruins. However, before they can advance, more monsters appear, so the group of adventurers decides to stay outside to stop them. Meanwhile, Yulisha and the general venture deeper into the ruins. Deep in the ruins, we see how the priestess is reaching the limit of her magic and doesn't have much life left. At that moment, a demon detects that the warriors have entered its domain, so he decides to go and take care of their visitors himself. The demon appears before the two of them, and a fierce battle begins, where, although Yulisha and the general are extremely good in combat, nothing seems to work. Even if they cut off its head, pierce its heart, or use the carp crystals, the demon regenerates as if nothing happened. While the warrior duo looks for a way to finish off the demon, in the priestess's room, boom, the protagonist and the princess appear from the ground. It turns out that this was the ingenious way that KP thought of to dodge all the monsters outside. Marlefa is surprised to see them there and thinks that they must have come to finish her off for her sins, but nothing could be further from the truth. Our pro, upon seeing her, thinks that she is responsible for the graffiti in the mansion and begins to criticize her for scratching other people's walls. Meanwhile, the princess attacks Apes and realizes that if someone from the church is there, the one trying to kill her must be the bishop. But there is no time to think about that. So the blonde gets to work and asks Carp to stay there to clean the graffiti that fell under Marlefa's as she goes to help the white-haired girl. The protagonist accepts, and as if he were capturing his home, he begins to erase the mark of the curse from the ground, which leaves the priestess with square eyes, wondering how it is possible. And it turns out that the fact that our protagonist is so powerful and innocent at the same time is very useful, since when erasing the mark, the demon's powers decrease drastically, leaving him without regeneration. Just then, the princess appears on the scene to get the demon's attention, but Sass launches an attack that completely pierces her and ends her life. The demon begins to celebrate, but let's not celebrate victory too soon. It turns out that the sword that our protagonist gave him has a special power. It can generate illusions that seem totally real, and that was what the demon pierced at. The monster, upon learning that he was tricked, becomes enraged and attacks the princess again. But that also turns out to be an illusion. Capitalizing on the oversight, the blonde swiftly dispatches the demon with a magic crystal. Bam! No muss, no fuss. With the monster dead, all the monsters summoned by it disappear in an instant, thus giving our friends the definitive victory. In the meantime, Carl finishes cleaning all the marks off the floor, and upon hearing the priestess's stomach growl, the all-around good guy decides to give her some of his food. By feeding her, he also immediately removes her curse, as he did at one point with the princess. At that moment, the rest arrived to thank Carp for having come there to help them, but just when everything was happy, some hooded men from Mimiko's intelligence unit appear. Without wasting any time, they take the priestess prisoner for interrogation, but Carl, as innocent and pure as ever, says goodbye to her, telling her that he will go visit the prison. What's more, he even promises to bring her some of the mulberry bread she liked so much, leaving everyone present speechless. After this intense confrontation, everyone decides to return to the city to relax and celebrate their great feat with a monumental banquet. But it doesn't end there, as our Silver has one last surprise in store for them. To close the night with a flourish, God used his skills to launch a spectacular fireworks show that lights up the entire sky, thus celebrating that peace has returned once again thanks to everyone's efforts. With the celebration over, we witness a flashback to our protagonist Carp's childhood, who lived in a small town called Huss. And one day, while running around the area, he came across a girl who was true to her kind nature and approached her to invite her to play. The girl said her name was He the Great and accepted the invitation. So they both went out to explore the outskirts of the village. During the journey, she came across a fence bush and fell to the ground as she ate one. Bam! He reacted quickly upon realizing that they were poisonous. Without hesitation, he dashed off in search of the materials needed to prepare an antidote. And just as he was about to administer it, the flashback abruptly ended. It had all been a dream. Upon waking, we realized that the group is no longer in the usual city. They were sent to a village to help with a water supply problem. Yisha got to work upon arrival, while Karf and the other adventurers climbed a nearby mountain to observe some waterfowl. Voila! As the white-haired girl searched for a solution, she overheard the villagers commenting in amazement about what was happening on the mountain. She quickly took flight to see what was going on and was utterly speechless upon discovering a massive lake that had not existed moments earlier. As expected, it was all Karp's doing. Realizing the birds were suffering from thirst, he decided to make them a lake. The village leaders thanked Yolisha, believing that she was the one who had done it. And with the mission solved in the blink of an eye, the group withdrew. In the meantime, the princess had a meeting with a duke who owned the lands where the group resided. The man had learned everything that had happened with the monsters and showed great interest in the Master Atelier for his own business. The princess tried to hide any information about it, but the situation became complicated when the duke offered to grant the Atelier the position of governor of the city. And to make matters worse, the general agreed to the proposal. Back at the mansion, the princess told Yolisha about the duke's movements. While they were deliberating what to do, the blonde asked about Karp, who was completely absorbed in taking care of an egg that had been given to him in the village, but nothing could be ordinary without the hands of the protagonist. The shell broke and a girl of no more than 3 years old emerged from it. Julie, shocked, regained her composure and warned Kar that the girl must be a monster in disguise, trying to lower her guard. Determined to eliminate her before it was too late, the white-haired girl prepared to act, but the protagonist begged her not to. At that moment, the girl reached out her hand, touched Yulisha's face and said, "Mom," managing to soften her icy heart. Moved, they decided to raise her and guide her on the right path. The group agreed and set about giving her a name. Kar suggested calling her Cry, which means union, and everyone accepted immediately. So now we have a new member. That same night, Yulisha slept next to the little girl and sent an urgent message to Memiko to find out exactly what kind of being she was. The next morning, the protagonist built her a complete playroom in an instant. And while the girl enjoyed her new room, Karp and Yulisha had to leave for a new mission. Akuri wanted to accompany them, but the protagonist convinced her to stay home with her sister Sistina. The girl accepted and they set off on their journey. Halfway there, they heard a strange noise coming from the carriage. When they stopped to investigate, they came across Aurihu, who replied matter-of-factly that she had flown in, and as Carl was putting an end to the chaos that must have reigned in the mansion with everyone searching for the girl, one of Mimiko's informants suddenly appeared. Before our boy could see her, she quickly changed her clothes and took advantage of the moment to send a message to both the mansion and Mimiko. With the matter resolved, they were about to resume their journey when a peculiar-looking old man stood before them and exclaimed, "You have arrived just in time. You have arrived just in time, traveling hero and companions. You must defeat the Demon King and save this world." The group was completely baffled, not knowing how to respond to the strange old man. Carl, without even asking the old man who he was or requesting any context, immediately accepted the mission. Yisha had to stop him instantly to question the old man's delusions. At that moment, a woman appeared and revealed herself to be his daughter-in-law and explained that due to his advanced age, the old man was somewhat senile and had the habit of calling anyone who crossed his path heroes. This reassured the white-haired young woman. The woman took the opportunity to clarify that she had been the one who had asked the Atelier Master for help, since her pigs were sick and refused to eat the other one. Carv, as soon as he saw the animals, knew exactly what to do. While the woman took the old man for a walk, he got to work and in an instant prepared a special food capable of whet the pigs' appetites and speeding up their recovery Just as he finished, a dragon descended from the sky, which made Yulisha's hair stand on end. She drew her sword ready to face it, but the protagonist stopped her before she could do anything crazy. In the rural areas, Sasato warned that it was completely common to prepare food for both livestock and any dragons that passed through the area. Yisha found it strange, but ended up accepting it. Thor began teaching Curie about dragons when suddenly Yulisha smelled an intense smell of blood. Upon tracking its origin, she found one of the phantoms that were escorting the dead protagonist on the ground. She immediately detected a hidden presence in the bushes and forced whoever was hiding there to come out with a single blow of her sword. A woman with an imposing character emerged from the underbrush. Yisha began to demand an explanation about what she was doing there, but the commotion attracted Karp and the girl. Upon seeing them, the woman lunged at the protagonist, determined to capture the monster. However, before she could touch either of them, the dragon intervened and flew him out of the place to safety. And she was grateful that Carl was far away and out of danger. so she could fight without worries. She asked the woman if her goal was to capture the protagonist, but she responded with total coldness. It doesn't matter what I'm here for. If you're gonna die anyway. The two began to fight, but the white-haired girl couldn't do much against the hunter and ended up on her knees after receiving a deep cut. When the hunter was about to deal the final blow, Yulisha threw one of Kur's magic stones and the explosion destroyed everything around her, Convinced that she had finished her off, she couldn't have been more wrong. The woman emerged unharmed from underground, and to top it all off, she unleashed a powerful transformation that made the atmosphere tense to the limit. The hunter was actually a demon, something that left Yulisha more than surprised. Before the situation could get out of hand, Kor appeared riding the dragon, ready to rescue his friend. What promised to be an epic arrival ended in a monumental stumble. Upon landing, he fell off the dragon in the clumsiest way imaginable. Julia Shana was not surprised, but at that moment the pigs that the protagonist had healed arrived in a stampede and launched themselves at the demon. She dispatched them with a single move and began to charge a massive fire attack to finish off everyone around her. Seeing the danger, Yulisha asked Karp for his dagger and stood in front of him to protect him. The demon launched the fireball, but at the last second of the attack, it inexplicably dispersed a line. Akuri had appeared out of nowhere, perched on top of Yulisha, protecting her. The white-haired girl was completely baffled. She was about to ask the demon if she had undone the spell for the girl and if she was the one she was looking for, when the villain began to feel the damage from the magic stone and before being defeated decided to retreat. Yisha, full of doubts, all exhausted, into Karp's arms. From there, Maltrecha asked her how she had gotten to Kyrian quickly if they had left her far away. Carla then revealed that what the girl called flying was actually a kind of teleportation, but there was no time for questions. The pigs they were supposed to help were lying injured on the ground, so before their owner showed up, they took them to the corral and Carlo once again. A while later, the farmer returned and thanked Yulisha profusely for everything they had done. For his part, our boy said goodbye to the dragon with a final lap in the air. During his flight, he spotted something strange in the woods and landed to investigate. Meanwhile, Yulisha Yakuhuri was already traveling back to the city when suddenly Karp descended on the dragon carrying someone else. It was the demon. What the protagonist had seen was the woman lying on the ground on the verge of death, and true to his nature, he decided to prepare medicine for her and save her life. Of course, Carl might be very innocent, but he was no fool. He had added a paralytic to the antidote so that he could capture the uncomplicated ones and give them to Yulisha. She was speechless at our boy's audacity and decided to take the demon prisoner with her. At dusk, upon reaching the mansion, Sina and the princess came out to hug her and beg him not to disappear like that again. But what no one expected was to find someone else waiting for them at the entrance. It was finally the new Atelier Master. Carl is thrilled to see that the Atelier Master has finally arrived, but something doesn't add up in Yulisha. With instincts on alert, she decides to ask our boy to go prepare dinner so she can be alone with the newcomer. At that moment, the supposed boss corners the white-haired girl against the carriage, but she, who doesn't mess around, looks him straight in the eyes and kicks him. And guess what? She goes right through him! It turns out that this Atelier Master was nothing more than an illusion created by the princess. The monarch breaks the spell, and just then a note from Mimiko falls from the sky. Tomorrow, he will have the results about Akuri's true nature, and he will personally go to inform them. The next day, our friends meet with the merchant who spills the beans. Dozens. No one knows exactly what the girl is. Akuri looks, speaks, and eats like a human. Even her blood is identical to that of any human. However, a material similar to magic stones was found in her nails, along with traces of something similar to teleportation stones, a magic that is considered lost centuries ago. Mimiko recommends locking the little girl in a laboratory for more in-depth studies, but upon hearing such a proposal, our boy stops him in his tracks. Karp is adamant he will never allow that. He does not sense a hint of evil in the girl, and flatly refuses to treat her as an object of study. The girls, given the protagonist's determination, agree with him and reject the idea immediately. Mimiko accepts the decision and moves on to the next matter, interrogating the demon. They take her to a special room in the mansion where the merchant wakes her up, but the prisoner refuses to cooperate. She says she will only speak to the person who defeated her, who, to her surprise, turns out to be Kar. They bring our boy before her. The woman reveals that she went after Kuro teleported to the carriage while they were traveling through the forest and wanted to use that ability to save someone very important, Hildegard, our boy's childhood friend. This shocks Kar. Desperate, he asks her where she is and why she is in danger. The demon confesses that Hildegard is being held prisoner in the Duke's basement of those lands. Mimiko, suspicious by nature, doubts the story, but the demon challenges her to ask Garp if he remembers the necklace her friend was wearing. Yeah, our boy mentions the necklace with a griffin engraved on it, and upon checking the one the prisoner is wearing, bingo, bingo, the emblem matches perfectly. With the story verified, Carl decides to go and rescue her no matter what it takes. Mimiko accepts, but on one condition. The demon must remain in the mansion without attempting to escape, or Hildegard will be abandoned to fate. Our boy approaches her and assures her that they will complete the mission, asking her to trust him and stay. The demon accepts the deal and reveals her name, Sulfur. With everyone in agreement, the group gets to work. Mimiko unfolds an extremely detailed map of the Duke's mansion and points out the only room that their spies were never able to access. If Hildegard is somewhere, it must be there. The problem is how to get in, since the only key is held by the Duke himself. Then the princess comes up with a brilliant idea. Create the illusion of a thief breaking through the wall with magic so that the panicking Duke opens the room himself. Oh my. The plan convinces everyone. All that remains is to choose the right moment, and luck is on their side. In a few days, a festival will be held in the Duke's city that will last 3 days. Taking advantage of the event and the nobleman's interest in meeting the fake Atelier Master, they will use all this as the perfect distraction. With everything ready, the group sets off for the festival. Upon arrival, the princess stands out from the rest to take her for a walk, while Ulisha takes charge of the real investigation. During the celebration, the blonde takes the opportunity to enjoy the day with the protagonist as if they were a real couple. They go through game after game, laughing and having fun until sunset. Without realizing it, they end up in front of a fountain with a direct view of the Duke's mansion, and Carl, upon seeing her, becomes cold and begins to regret not being able to participate more actively in the rescue. The princess, seeing him so discouraged, decides to cheer him up. She's telling him they're there because of him, because of everything he's done for them to date. She assures him that there is nothing to worry about. Everyone is more than ready to rescue Hildegard. Those words bring back the sparkle to our boy's eyes. He thanks the blonde for her words, and thus, amidst the lights of the festival and the promise of a victory that feels close, this beautiful day ends. The next day of the festival, the roles are reversed. Now it's Ulisha who's ready to have her dream date with the protagonist, while the princess takes care of the investigation. The white-haired girl is excited to tour the festival, hoping that things will go better for her than for her rival. But the day is ruined before it even starts. It turns out that they pass it near a place that is being destroyed by some gangsters, and Carp, as good as ever, immediately intervenes to throw the thugs out. They try to stand up to our protagonist until Ulisha shows up and warns them that they are part of the Atelier Master's workshop. And since the guys didn't want any trouble with someone of that level, they decide to fly away with the thugs out of the picture. Carl checks the owner of the stall and notices that he has a fracture, so without saying a word, he runs off with the Don in tow straight to the hospital. EC. Meanwhile, Ulisha is already starting to regret her ruined date when she realizes that she's not the only sad one in the place. The Lord's daughter is crying for her father and for how the entire stall was destroyed. The white-haired girl tries to cheer up the girl, and when she looks across the street, she sees a vendor selling thornless cacti, a local fruit full of sweet juice. As she approaches to buy one, Ulisha realizes that the vendor is actually a spy for the Phantom Unit. The woman reveals that there is an important cooking contest being held today, and that the restaurant that has won for 2 years in a row was the one that sent the gang members to ensure their victory. With this information, the white-haired girl knows exactly what is going to happen. Our protagonist is gonna intervene. No sooner said than done. As soon as he arrives, Carl promises the girl that he will take care of the stall, and that he will teach her a foolproof recipe for hot buns to win the contest. Ulisha has no choice but to cooperate, so she asks the protagonist what materials he needs. He asks her to get thornless cacti and red beans. After a while, the judges of the contest finally arrive in the area. First, they try a donut made by the previous champion and are delighted until they see a great commotion from the people in the bun's place. Both the judges and the rival chef come over to see what's going on. The villain wonders how they can keep working if he himself ordered them to be eliminated. Just then, Luna approaches with the buns ready for the judges to try, and boom, they make them fly in a sea of flavor with how delicious they are. The skeptical rival chef tries them and is just as shocked, asking, in desperation, how they were made. Then Ulisha proudly approaches to explain that it's all thanks to Carp's recipe. The chef, unable to accept defeat, tries to bribe one of the judges without any success. Furiously, he manages to see how the gang members he had hired were spying on him from an alley. He approaches to complain to them about not having done the job, but turns out that they weren't the real gang members. It was the princess with two phantoms creating a perfect illusion to catch the corrupt chef, Witty-sam. There we learn of a more than convenient coincidence. This guy is also the head chef at the Duke's mansion, Baffin. So our friends take advantage of the situation and immediately lock him up in order to use his absence to make it easier for them to get to the mysterious room. Later that day, the Duke learns of his personal chef's arrest. Since he has a tea party with the princess the next day, he panics and demands that they hire a replacement urgently. One of the assistants, without hesitation, suggests hiring the winner of the previous day's contest, and the Duke immediately agrees. The next day, our friends are putting the final details of their master plan into action. Tharp is sent back to help Luna until her father recovers while the girls head towards the Duke's mansion. However, just as they reach the door, Yulisha receives a flash report from the Phantoms. It turns out that her secret infiltration plan is now in jeopardy. Our protagonist was hired that very morning by the Duke to be the chef for the tea party. The news leaves our friends speechless. It seems that their discreet plan is going to fall apart because wherever Car goes, trouble is guaranteed. For his part, our protagonist is already settled inside the mansion with the buns ready for the tea party. And as it could not be otherwise, he took little Curie with him. After a while, the butler comes to pick up the order from the kitchen and asks Car to stay there and wait in case they need anything else. The protagonist accepts, but at that moment he realizes that he is in the Duke's mansion and that the mysterious door his friend is leading to is right behind him. However, this discourages him because his humility tells him that he should not try anything on his own since he does not consider himself powerful at all. Just then, Kerr, who heard his father's wish to see his friend, hugs him tightly and BAM! Uses his teleportation powers to appear on the other side of the door. This makes Carb nervous and he asks her to please return to the kitchen. But it turns out that the girl can't use her powers that often, so they get stuck in the forbidden area. Just then, Carl hears a woman's voice behind a wooden door and thinking it's Hildegard, he takes out his Gansua and opens it in less than a rooster crow's. But to his surprise, there's only an old woman there. The lady, far from being upset by the intruders, welcomes them with incredible peace and asks if he came to rescue the demon Hildegard, who is locked up just below her room. The news shocks our protagonist, Odd, who begs the lady to take him with her. The old woman agrees, and by pressing a secret button opens a hidden door that reveals a staircase to the depths. At the same time, on the upper floor, the princess meets the Duke and starts her dreams coming true. Taking advantage of the fact that the fat man is eager to meet the supposed Atelier Master, the princess manipulates him into spilling the beans. The Duke confesses that his true obsession is finding the elixir of youth, and to achieve this, he is conducting atrocious experiments by crossing demon cells with humans. But when the princess sees his face as he reveals the information, she doesn't believe that he is doing it for money or power, but for some other reason. But there is no time for theories, and the plan must begin. The princess makes an illusion of herself enter the room and report that a thief has managed to infiltrate the mansion and is looking for something specific. Upon hearing her, the Duke panics and asks his guest to stay there while he goes to see what is happening. The guy leaves as quickly as possible while the real princess follows him closely with an invisibility spell. The fat man reaches the mysterious door and upon seeing the fake thieves falls head over heels into the trap. He opens the door without thinking twice, and upon reaching the old woman's room, the Duke begins to wonder about Famille Wad, which leaves the blonde speechless. What leaves the blonde speechless? And it is the Duke's family who supposedly had already died a long time ago. All worried, a man enters to the corridor to look for his daughter, while the princess decides that the best thing to do is to go look for Yulisha in case the situation gets complicated. Meanwhile, our Prata finds himself in front of Hildegard, who is pressed with a spell and chains to the wall, and at first sight, Carve promises to save her, and Famile promptly sets her free. Now that the girl is free, our Proto realizes that she is exactly the same as when they were children. She has not changed at all. Hildegard, as soon as he sees Car, thanks him for saving her, but he throws himself at him, shouting that he is like this because of her. It turns out that when they were children, when giving him the antidote for the poisoning, Carl mixed up the quantities and accidentally created a potion of eternal youth. This surprises Carl, who apologizes profusely for the mistake. The dwarf accepts the apology and asks if it couldn't be another similar potion for Fam, but Carla explains that that's impossible. It turns out that for that potion, she used a flower called Rainbow Dandelion that she has never seen again since that day. Because then the Duke arrives and thinks that our protagonist is the thief. Carl immediately explains that he is not a thief and that he is only there to save the demon. And he takes the opportunity to ask the Duke why he had Hildegard captive and his daughter locked up. But before the fat man can answer, our protagonist draws his own conclusion, which is totally absurd, which is Carl thinks that the Duke did that because he is a cradle robber and did not want a daughter who would grow old, so he kidnapped Hildegard to have a daughter who would be a girl all her life. Upon hearing such nonsense, a demoness stops playing games, paralyzes the protagonist with a spell, and asks Famille if she is still willing to continue with her plan to assassinate her father. Famille tells Hildegard that the plan is still on and coldly asks her to assassinate her own father. Upon hearing this, the Duke flees the room, but upon leaving, he runs head-on into the princess and Yulisha, who are already waiting for him. The blonde tells him she knows his whole plan. She knows that he kidnapped the demoness and experimented on humans to save his daughter, who suffers from an incurable premature aging disease. Cornered, the Duke uses his last cartridge. He throws a magic stone to the ground to activate a summoning circle and offer souls in exchange for Famille's health. But the spell fails miserably. It turns out that the ritual needed the flow of hot springs that passed under the mansion, but since Carp diverted them the day before to boil his bios, the circle was rendered useless. Upon seeing this, the fat man panics completely. That man had sworn to her that this would work perfectly. Upon hearing this, the princess tries to interrogate him about that mysterious man, but just before the blonde can ask anything, Hildegard appears ready to slit the Duke's throat. The fat man asks the demon in desperation why his daughter would want to kill him if everything he did for her. To which Lenana replies crudely that Famille would rather die than allow innocents to be sacrificed in his name. And if she has to let her father die to stop the massacre, she will. The blinded Duke shouts that he wouldn't mind using as many lives as necessary to save his daughter, which forces the demon to raise her sword, ready to send him to St. Peter. But just then, Famil appears completely young and healthy again. It turns out that he ate one of the buns that our protagonist prepared. And poof, illness cured instantly. Confronted by the miracle, the Duke surrenders and yields. His daughter was already safe, so he had no reason to fight. But the princess, showing her most merciful side, forgives him and decides not to send him to prison on the condition that he finances and favors the Atelier's workshop forever. The Duke accepts without any problems. However, peace in this world is short-lived. A mysterious figure emerges from the shadows. Hildegard recognizes him instantly. It is Scriptor. He was the origin of all evil this time. He manipulated the Duke, who cursed the family with the disease of aging, and was the one who tricked the bishop into killing the princess. All in order to unleash a war. The Duke tries to attack him, but a magical barrier stops him in his tracks. Yisha also launches the attack, and to Scriptor's surprise, his sword forged by Icar begins to scream its supposedly indestructible barrier Anito. Nervous, Scriptor takes out a strange jar and pours its contents into the failed summoning circle, and boom, the forest demon reappears, the one we thought was dead. But it turns out that being a monster made of pure dark magic, it can't die so easily. The monster disarms the girls in a second and injures them to their merit, but when all seems lost, our protagonist appears with Kerpot upon seeing the demon, and with a frightening calmness he comments that it's been a long time since he saw one of that species and that it's rare to find them these days. The demon, terrified by the protagonist's calmness, casts a fire spell, but Akuri teleports him behind the demon, causing the creature to burn itself with its own magic. Furious, he launches another massive fire attack. Eula, seeing them, steps in to protect Carpata and try to stop the magic attack. Suddenly, the weapon absorbs the fire, allowing the white-haired girl to return the attack as if it were bouncing it off. The demon is on the brink of death again, but in a final act of evil, he decides to throw a deadly spike at Hildegard. The attack hits her squarely, but the spike breaks into 1,000 pieces. It turns out that the dwarf had kept the stale bread that Ka offered him moments before in his clothes, and the legendary hardness of the protagonist's bread destroyed the projectile. The demon, unable to believe that a piece of bread stopped his final attack, looks at Karp and asks him if he comes from Ha's village. With our protagonist smiling as if nothing happened, the demon spirit collapses from the sheer existential stress that Karp generates in him, disappearing from this world once again. After the victory, the boy begins to explain with total naturalness that in his village Hertz, it was super cool for people like that to attack, so the villagers devised 1,000 ways to get rid of them, to the point that the demons ended up fearing the humans of that town. Later that day, after so many fights and unraveling mysteries, our friends finally managed to return to the mansion with their mission accomplished. The grateful and repentant Duke not only freed Hildegard but also named Carp an honorary Knight Boyu. Although the protagonist, as humble as ever, thinks that the title is too big for him and that he did nothing special. For her part, Hildegard, now free, decides to embark on the journey back to her country. Meanwhile, Aleja fondly looks at a metal flower that Carp gave her and sighs deeply, thanking fate for having been able to see her childhood friend once more after 100 years. And we conclude this season finale with our friends enjoying a delicious snack in the mansion's garden. The princess seizes the moment and uses her illusion of Atelier Master to give Carp the final news. The master must leave for the capital for an indefinite period of time, and has decided that he will be the one to officially take his place. And so finally, our protagonist gets the job he always deserved, ending the first season of this anime.